Welcome to Beat Diabetes. For the last several weeks, we have been discussing Sara Hallberg's book, Status Quo Thinking is Harming Your Health. And I got to thinking about her YouTube video that was so famous. It was a TED Talk, and it was about 18 minutes long, became just a huge sensation. I looked at it today. According to YouTube, it has about 11 million views. Now, Sara Hallberg has passed on, but she is still speaking powerfully through videos and her books about the low-carb lifestyle and about how we can overcome obesity and type 2 diabetes through cutting our carbs. But I took another look at her video, that TED Talk. It's titled, Reversing Type 2 Diabetes Starts with Ignoring the Guidelines. That's a pretty powerful statement and probably might elicit some feelings of what in the world is she talking about? But I think she was absolutely right. And I've seen that video several times already, but this time I actually listened to it and I typed some notes as she was talking, and I wanted to share a few thoughts. And then toward the end of the video, I want to answer the question, why? Why was this particular video so powerful, so watched? And I've had a number of diabetics, former diabetics, that have told me through the comments, yeah, that was the first thing I really watched that set me in the right direction, and I'm no longer diabetic, according to my A1C these days. So let's get into some of the things she says. She starts out saying, I've got the greatest job in the world, and she tells how she's an obesity doctor. So when you first hear that, you think, okay, this is about how to lose weight. But I mean, within 45 seconds, she shifts to talking about insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and she's off to the races. So though technically she is an obesity doctor, it seemed like her heart was always about insulin resistance and diabetes and how to beat it. So, of course, that is what attracted me to her talk. And let's just share some of the things she talks about, and then we'll get into why that hit the internet so powerfully when it did. And it was probably close to 10 years now that video was first put up on YouTube. She mentions insulin. She's going to talk a lot about insulin. She says it's the main hormone involved in obesity. Most obese individuals are resistant to insulin. So that's why you can't hardly talk about obesity without talking about type 2 diabetes and the other way around. You talk about diabetes and type 2 diabetes anyway, and you're normally going to be looking at a lot of obese people. And yes, I know some thin people are type 2 diabetics, but most of them are not. And there's so much of a tight correspondence between obesity and diabetes that when you look at a middle-aged person who is significantly overweight, let's say a man who's 5'10" tall, and he's probably in his upper 200 pounds or 300 pounds or 400 pounds, you look at such a person, you think he's probably got diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and he probably does. She mentions that when you are insulin resistant, the body's response is to make more insulin. Why is that important? Because the more insulin that is being produced, the more resistant you become. The more resistant you become, the more insulin your pancreas, your poor, worn out, tired pancreas has to try to make to keep up with this process, and it doesn't lead to good results. But she says something interesting, something we all pretty much know these days, and that is that insulin levels will rise and rise for years, and glucose levels may remain almost normal. So, and she's exactly right, and she's not the only one that has said this, but she was one of the leading forerunners in this whole area, that you can have insulin resistance, and you're running on twice as much insulin. It's almost like insulin inflation. Inflation means you spend more money to get the exact same product that you did last year. So last year you spent $1 for a loaf of bread, and now you spend $2, and next year you're going to be spending $3. You're getting the same product, a loaf of bread, but you're spending a whole lot more money. Now, that's the way it is with insulin. Most type 2 diabetics have insulin inflation. It's taking a lot more insulin to try to keep you at normal levels, and after a while, all that insulin can't do it. So you may have high insulin and high glucose for a while until finally your pancreas gives out and you no longer have high insulin. Your pancreas can't make high insulin anymore, and then your glucose really goes up and you've got real problems. And of course, we call that diabetes. So insulin resistant may well mean that your doctor will tell you you're not diabetic, you're not even close to diabetic, you're not pre-diabetic. And yet if you're running at 3 to 4 times as much insulin as it used to take you to keep at those levels, you're on the road, my friend. You're just not there yet. She mentions a couple other things about insulin. Number one, it makes us hungry. When you've got a lot of insulin going on in your body, you are hungry. Some people say, why am I hungry all the time? Chances are, or at least there's a good and excellent chance, you've got a lot of insulin going on. You're eating too many carbs. You're too much overweight. Your pancreas is pumping out that insulin, pumping its little guts out, and you're just hungry all the time. And you say to yourself, well, I know the answer is willpower. I've just got to have willpower. Be strong, Dennis, be strong. And you can't be strong because all that insulin is telling you you've got to eat. It creates hunger. And the second bad thing about having too much insulin is it creates fat storage. So you're eating more food and it's storing it as fat all over your body and usually especially in your belly. So it creates hunger. It creates fat storage. And you've thought to yourself, I've just got to get hold of myself. I've just got to tell myself, stop. And yet you cannot stop because all that insulin is making you hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. She talks about the vicious cycle that comes along when you eat so many carbs. She says the cycle is this. Number one, eat carbs. Number 2, your glucose goes up. Number 3, your insulin goes up. Number 4, you get hunger and fat storage. So you get hungrier and hungrier and you store more and more fat. You're getting bigger and bigger and you're hungrier and hungrier and getting bigger and bigger and you're getting hungrier and hungrier. You talk about a vicious cycle. And then you say, well, I've just got to get hold of myself. I've got to use willpower. Willpower, Dennis, willpower. And willpower is not going to be enough unless it's the will to put your fork down and quit eating all those carbs. Go ahead and have a big steak. And if you're still hungry, have another big steak. And if you're still hungry, have a couple of eggs and have a low-carb garden salad. But stop eating all those carbs. She talks about the ADA recommendation. She's pretty tough on the ADA. Now, keep in mind that this was made 9 to 10 years ago. So the ADA has changed some, but not enough. And she mentions their guidelines are consume 45 to 60 grams of carbs per meal, plus more at snacks. And they allow you snacks. So a meal, 40, 50, 60 grams of carbs. A snack, 20 grams more. Another meal, 50 or 60 grams of carbs. Another snack, 20, 25 grams of carbs more. And just from meal to meal, snack to snack, carbs after carbs. And this is supposed to be an organization that is going to help you defeat diabetes? Something is wrong here. She says, trust me, that's a lot of carbs. And my word is amen. That is a lot of carbs. And then she says this powerful statement. We are essentially recommending that they eat what is causing their problem. Sounds crazy? She asks. It really, really is. We're recommending they eat the very thing that's destroying them, causing their problem, making them a diabetic. And we're saying, have some more carbs, have some more carbs. And they're getting hungrier and fatter and hungrier and fatter and more insulin resistant. And their pancreas is pumping its little guts out with all that insulin. And their body's becoming more resistant, more resistant. No, don't want any more glucose in my cells. She says the ADA tells you if you're taking certain diabetes meds, you actually should eat carbs because otherwise you might get a hypo. So she says the cycle is this. You take the meds and then you have to eat carbs to match the meds, and then you take more meds because they're making your blood sugar go up, and then you eat more carbs because you don't want a hypo. And again, another vicious cycle. She says even worse is that nowhere in the ADA guidelines is the goal of reversing type 2 diabetes. This needs to be changed because type 2 diabetes can be reversed in many, if not most situations, especially if we start early. Now, keep in mind, her title for this TED Talk that she posted 9 or more years ago says reversing type 2 diabetes starts with ignoring the guidelines. In other words, all that you've been hearing and been told by people like the ADA, you got to ignore that and go a different direction. And keep in mind, this hit the internet like dynamite, up to 11 million views, and it's still being watched today. She says, my rules for eating is this: if it says light, low fat, or fat-free, don't buy it, don't eat it. It's just going to have more sugar. She says, eat real food. Don't eat anything you don't like. Eat when you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not hungry. And then she gives 3 things to not eat. And if you just avoid these 3, you'd be well on your way to beating diabetes. Don't eat grains. Don't eat potatoes. Don't eat sugar or products that have a lot of added sugar. If you can avoid those, pretty much everything else is fair game. And she talks about how she eats well, she cooks well, she uses certain nut flours like coconut flour, almond flour, uses some flaxseed, she creates, she bakes, but she doesn't use wheat and the kind of grains that most people think about. And then she mentions a study she did in her own clinic where they took 50 obese patients and she gave them the ADA guidelines and told them, eat like the ADA, American Diabetes Association, tells you. And then she took 50 other patients. She said, you eat low carb, high fat. And she said the difference was night and day. And the low carb, high fat people, she said, saved around $2,000 a year over the others because of all the diabetes meds that they were able to get them off of and the insulin. And one of the most powerful statement she makes in the entire TED Talk is this. And I've quoted this numerous times. I can practically say it by memory, but I'm going to go ahead and look at my note. Low-carb intervention works so fast that we can literally pull people off hundreds of units of insulin in days to weeks. Low-carb intervention, that means you intervene and you get them off the standard diet, you get them off the low-fat diet if that's what they were doing, and you put them on low-carb, high-fat, moderate protein. She says this is so powerful. It works so efficiently, so effectively. It's such dynamite in a good way to the system. We start pulling them off insulin in days or maybe weeks, hundreds of units of insulin. And you have to do that because if you don't pull them off some of that insulin, they'll have hypos. Their body won't be used to that low-carb diet. Powerful, powerful, powerful. Now, we're going to quickly wrap this up. Why was this video so effective? Now, on the one hand, I can say, you know what? I don't think it would be as effective today because today the knowledge of what she's saying is so common these days that it wouldn't hit us probably as hard. Everything she said, I agree with, and I've heard from other sources as well. But when she said it almost 10 years ago, it was a lot newer and a lot fresher, and a lot of people hadn't heard it, and boom, it just hit that internet so powerfully, and word got around. So one of the reasons this video was so effective was it just wasn't being talked about as much as it is today. Secondly, she says it in such a succinct and yet complete way. I mean, pretty much everything you need to know to get you started and get you moving in the direction to beat diabetes. It's all there in 18 minutes. 18 minutes, and she says almost everything you need to hear. I hate to say it, but you could almost forget my channel. Watch that one video over and over again, and you'd pretty well know everything you need to know. I'm glad you do watch my channel, obviously, but I have to give her credit. It's a tremendous talk. 18 minutes. She's a gifted speaker. Another reason why I was successful. She didn't stumble around like I do. She's very fluent, very good. Fourthly, the logic is irrefutable. I mean, the logic she shares, you just can't argue with it. It is so powerful and so clear and so obvious. What was it Thomas Jefferson said? We hold these truths to be self-evident. When these truths come out of Sara Hallberg's mouth, it's just about self-evident. And then finally, the results are irrefutable. And not just the 50 ADA versus the 50 low carb, but she shares about a woman that was on 300 units of insulin per day, and they pulled her off all of them, and they took her off all meds as she progressed, as she lowered her carbs. The results are all over the place. They're on my channel, they're on Dr. Barry's channel, and Sten Ekberg's channel. The results are everywhere if you have the eyes to see and you bother to look. So I'll put a link to her talk down below. 18 minutes of your time is a good investment. I wholeheartedly endorse, as far as I can recall, virtually everything she says. I just buy into it all. God bless you. I want to remind you that we've grouped certain videos together into series that are available for you to download on your phones or computers. Out of the many hundreds of videos I've made about diabetes, I put together 3 series that I consider to be the most important and fundamental for the newly diagnosed diabetic who is desperate to get their blood sugar down in a hurry. First is the original series I call the Diabetes Emergency Kit. Second is the series titled More Fundamentals of Beating Diabetes. And third is my latest series called Beat Diabetes in 6 Months, and these are videos specifically created from our Beat Diabetes challenges. There'll be a link in the description that will take you to where you need to go to purchase any one or all 3 of these Beat Diabetes series. You can watch the videos immediately on your phone or computer, and you can also download them. Also, I give you permission to copy these files, put them on a flash drive, and share them with someone you care about.